Let's shift on to more of this eviction moratorium fallout here. As this is Max Blumenthal on the ground at the Capitol steps once again. And what you notice on Monday is a lot more of these shitty establishment Democrats came out to the Capitol and using this as a PR stunt. And this is Max Blumenthal trying to get answers from one of the most corrupt war criminals that we have in the House, and Adam Schiff.
Representative Schiff, do you think we could reallocate $4 billion from apartheid Israel to free housing for Americans? The $4 billion that you allocate every year to apartheid Israel?
You see that? You see the moment of fucking shame that Adam Schiff had when he looked into the eyes of Max Blumenthal, but then his lips moved a bit, but nothing was going to come out just because it was going to make him look like fucking garbage no matter what he said. And he knew the only thing he could really do that made sense for him was to ignore Max Blumenthal.
Why Jesse Jackson opposes all the wars you support? Representative Schiff, Jesse Jackson opposes all the wars you support. Can we get the What about, is there any war you have opposed, Representative Schiff? Is there any war you've opposed? Those wars cost a lot that could be spent on housing for Americans. Just give them a moment, please.
This isn't just a matter of different politicians having different solutions to help us reach common goals. It's yet another front in this country's ongoing war against the poor.
What has Adam Schiff done but talk about a new Cold War with Russia, supporting Israel, giving money to war instead of the poor? He stands for everything Martin Luther King was against. And he's here for a phony photo op. This pro-war right-wing Democrat wants a photo op with Jesse Jackson when Jesse Jackson opposes every war that he supported. Why did you support the genocide in Yemen? Why do you support the brutal assaults on Palestinians? Why not? He's a pro-war legislator.
Can you please stop?
This
is something not about
You don't
this.
control this. The people
I
control
don't,
this.
but they're here with their time. They are taking time for us as the
He's
people.
here for a photo op. He
No,
gives
he
all
is
our
not.
money to war.
Please stop.
War is part of the topic.
Look, you have the freedom of speech, but this is about something else. This is about people's homes.
Yes.
People are
Why
going
are
through
we
a
spending
crisis
$4
right now.
billion on Israel every year instead of free housing for Americans?
$5 trillion.
Adam Schiff doesn't agree. He should be pressured. This is not your friend. $4 billion a year to apartheid Israel. We need to put pressure on these people who are giving our money away that should be spent on free housing.
And this is the first of an example of, you see all those blank stares as Max Blumenthal tried to implore people to demand more from their politicians. And those blank stares are infuriating to me, because those stares are saying to me that they're looking at guys like Max Blumenthal and Franc Analysis like they're fucking crazy. And that's just really infuriating, because the fact that there's too many people showing up at these who are unwilling to question hold politicians' feet to the fire. And it's fucking awful because we should not be accepting or settling for this shit. Especially that fucking Karen who tried to step in and demand that Max Blumenthal stop what he's doing. Absolutely not. And if I had been there, I would have not been able to compose myself. Even if you think that I'm not that type of person, that would have been hard. We don't work for the politicians. They're supposed to work for us. It's about fucking time we start acting like they're our employee. We don't work for them. And we gotta let go of that mentality.
For the eviction. Is Putin responsible for the eviction crisis? Is Putin responsible? Is it Vladimir Putin's fault? Does anyone know where the DNC hard drive is anyway? All you talk about is Putin and Russia raising the military budget that could be spent on housing for Americans. How about Venezuela, which builds free housing for its people? You support sanctions to destroy their housing program for their people. You support every war. What are you doing here pretending to be on Jesse Jackson's side when Jesse Jackson has stood against all the wars you support? He stood against the war. You should be challenged from the left. Jesse Jackson stood against the U.S. war on Cuba that you support, the U.S. economic war. Yes. Representative Schiff, is Putin responsible for...
I'm sorry, but we gotta have more voices amplifying the independent journalism of Max Blumenthal, Colin, Kobe Azule, Franc Analysis. Those have been the people ready to challenge. And it's hard to, even though Blumenthal is absolutely right, to bring up war because war is sucking up all the money that should be used to take care of the people. The military-industrial complex should be defunded by a minimum of 50%. Although you could easily defund that by more than 90% and still have more money than so many other countries that are just below the United States. And these politicians, these establishment ghouls, ended up bastardizing the fuck out of this moment for their own personal gain. So I feel like that was a big theme of what happened on Monday is that. But the other problem is we aren't having enough independent-minded people who aren't willing to just accept the shit that's being delivered as gospel. And this ruling came through yesterday. President Biden is expected to announce a new federal eviction moratorium to replace the one that expired on Saturday, targeting counties with elevated rates of coronavirus infections, according to White House and Hill sources. It's expected to cover 90% of renters' population. And there's a lot of people out there, namely the progressive sheep herders, the gatekeeping fucks, are spinning this shit as a win. That's a 10% loss. And if you think the work is done, it's not for a second. All that they've really done is kick the can down the road once again, just like they have done the previous few times with this coronavirus case here. And we have to start demanding more. Well, we cannot just let these politicians dictate what a victory is. Because settling on this won't work. And I'm not being ungrateful. I'm actually advocating to get more done here. Not just settle for a means-tested version of what should have already been extended well before yesterday. There's plenty of good leftists out there who know that this isn't a victory. But the problem is, so many people are moving on to something else. Plus, we don't even know if this could have all happened, even if everyone in the house went home. And these demonstrations still happened organically, even without a single politician present. Those are variances that aren't known, but may have not even changed this type of outcome. As I said, I'm not trying to, it is definitely performative, and I'm not trying to marginalize that term in a bad way. What I'm saying here is that for a while it looked like it was a performative outcome with no type of payoff in sight. Until yesterday, there was a slight improvement with this new 60-day moratorium put in place. But if you don't believe that this was a designed, coordinated effort to keep these progressives sheep-herded into the Democratic Party, then you're not thinking big picture here. I'm not questioning the genuineness of Cori Bush, but I do question the outcome of the demands that are being made. Because our ask should be much higher than that. And with the way that these progressives, specifically the squad, tell you to effectively shut up and trust the plan, and that ain't sitting well for so many people. And no, you do not have to be glued in online to feel that to reach the same thought process as people like me. Even though, yes, Democrats do really hate the left, they also want to make sure that they don't lose them either. And if they can continue to placate you with a slight loss like this, then they'll be glad to do that every single time until you, specifically the left, starts to grow a backbone and get the fuck out of this abusive relationship that is being had with the Democratic Party over these last 40 to 60 years. Before I get into what happened with Franc Analysis yesterday, I really enjoyed this moment from Max Blumenthal.
Look at you. You work for Congress? You work for the most violent institution on earth.
You defend the Chinese genocide.
You defend the State Department. You defend the most violent institution on the planet.
There's no genocide.
Oh, there's no genocide.
Look at you. You work for Congress? You work for the most violent institution on earth.
You defend the Chinese genocide.
You defend the State Department. You defend the most violent institution on the planet.
There's no genocide.
That delivery was top notch from Max Blumenthal. And I gotta say, you can't just it's hard to say these like online left lingo terms and make it as smooth as he does in person. It's one thing to throw these terms off like bootlicker and do it in a live stream, but when you do it in real life like he just did, that was gold. 10 out of 10 for that, Max. Let's get into more of the impressive work that Franc Analysis has done trying to hold politicians' feet to the fire. So let's play this video.
Will people's rent be forgiven?
None of that.
Will people's rent be forgiven?
We're gonna figure that out.
Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'll keep pressuring. Yeah.
So here's what we're gonna do. The CDC just announced an eviction moratorium, and what we're here is for our reasons known and unknown. So our reasons known was to make sure that we extended this moratorium. That's what we're here to do.
This is only ceasefire. This is only ceasefire. This is not a victory. People still owe money. People still owe money. People still owe money. No, this is only ceasefire. People still owe money. What are we gonna do in 90 days? You're acting like this is a victory when people still owe money.
What are you going to do? You charged us. What are you going to do?
Hold your corporate colleagues accountable. They're giving money to Israel, an apartheid state, when they could be using that money to forget people's rent.
Give it up for a minute. We all have to keep pushing together.
That's right. Then don't stop coming out. Then don't stop coming out. Keep showing up for 90 days straight.
We can't keep showing up, but we...
Then let's do it. Let's not stop. Let's not only rely on
I agree,
them.
but they are exhausted and we need to help them.
Then let's keep doing. Then we need to not rely on leaders.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Thank you all. Real quick, tensions are starting to escalate conversation real quick. The overall sentiment here is we can take a pause to appreciate the efforts that we've all collectively put together and accomplished.
So that corporations can scheme in the meantime.
Like the congressman has said, the work is still not done, and that requires us to be here. Everyone keeps asking, what should we do now? We're going to keep here. We're going to stay here until the rest of the work gets done.
We're not buying the theatrics. We're not buying the theatrics. No, I'm not one person. My man right there. We have 137 people watching.
137
Yes.
people. Damn.
And also got to shout out Colin Radix Carter for trying to back up Franco in that situation. And this is another example of how they're treating an actual journalist who is trying to hold politicians accountable like they're crazy. Then you see this guy speak with this savior mentality, and that woman conveying that we gotta work to help them. No! They have to do more to help the people. Stop buying into this bullshit ass backwards logic. It's on them. And it's on us to stop accepting the minimum from our politicians and continuously demand more until they meet the demands. And this is an example of how people are being fucking ridiculous and treating actual journalists challenging power as if they're crazy.
Like the congressman has said, the work is still not done, and that requires us to be here. Everyone keeps asking, what should we do now? We're going to keep here. We're going to stay here until the rest of the work gets done.
We're not buying the theatrics. We're not buying the theatrics.
It's not over. You're still here.
No, I'm not one person. My man right there. We have 137 people watching.
137 people. Damn.
For a small channel, what, you're gonna say I can't do this?
I didn't say you can't do this, but you're talking like
Yeah, there's homeless people, people that owe rent. What are we gonna do about that? This is only a 90-day pause, and they know it. They don't. You saw how AOC said, "Oh, we'll talk about that later," because she doesn't have an answer now. Because she hasn't thought about it. Just like she waited for this for months. She waited for this for months, and then to do this last minute, she has a huge following. There were too many.
Yeah, her first legislation. What do you want to do?
Informing people. You think that should inform people? How is it rolling? How is it irrelevant that they're using money? How is it irrelevant that they're using money for wars when they could be using money against that? They voted for it. They voted against the budget for Israel.
No, they voted against it. I don't even know what you're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about.
Research.
They increased the budget for Israel.
Fully shut the fuck up, Anders Lee. You shitty ass fucking bicycle Karen trying to step in and protect politicians. You can fuck all the way off with your gatekeeping ass bullshit, because I will not stand here for that. And even if the squad was less pro-imperialism towards the idea of Israel, Palestine, it doesn't take away from the fact that Franc Analysis is saying here is that by and large, the squad has just been as imperialistic as the rest of that fucking Democratic Party. But there's more. This sheep herding cuck Ryan Grimm, who if you look at that live stream, he was pretty cordial to Franco when he asked him a couple of questions. But then he takes to Twitter to talk shit behind his back in the typical sheep herder backstabbing action. The problem with building your entire persona brand politics on the idea that nothing good can ever happen is that if something decent happens, you feel compelled to diminish it. Actively try to stop good things from happening just to prove your own cynicism correct. And I know where this a weak ass faulty argument is headed. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Every time someone has broke out that argument, the thing that they're trying to argue is good has never been good. And I'm still waiting for the first time that's the argument is actually something good. Because this is at least 10% worse than the previous eviction moratorium that was in place. And with no plan in sight to evolve on this to make sure that people are actually getting their rent forgiven, paying the landlords. That way, they're not just going to eventually evict people due to all that endless amount of back pay. That's why this alone just isn't good. And if we continue to let people try to defend the not good enough outcomes from the politicians, then we just aren't getting anywhere here. Cynicism is cowardice masking itself as toughness. It is a fear of believing in something or for fear you'll just be disappointed. It's totally understandable, but all it is fear transformed into a coping mechanism. No, Ryan Grimm, what's cowardice is continuing to provide cover for a Democratic Party and specifically progressives in the squad who haven't been doing enough from the moment that Joe Biden has taken office. I say that your sheep herding is a cowardice masking itself as toughness, a smugness, when you're actively trying to prevent other things from happening here. That's what's really taking effect. Even though you try to argue that you didn't try to hurt the actions of this recent Medicare for All march. You largely did, with the exception of one rising segment a day or two before promoting the event. And he tries to take this lame ass shot at Franco's profile picture. This shit airballed. Not just like a airball that was like a foot or two away from the basket. This was like a airball like 8 feet short of the basket here. Because when you're Ryan Grimm, most of your pot shots at your politicians, at the people to his left, just constantly brick. Because the shit just doesn't land in the basket. But one thing to keep in mind is that Franco didn't even know that this guy, Anders Lee, is part of Red Acted Tonight as a contributor on the RT America show, which Lee Camp host. And let's see some of these really bad statements that he's made. You weren't there. Don't jump to conclusions if you don't understand the context. Franco was lecturing people who had been sleeping on the Capitol steps for days, started making up blatant lies. If he were in charge of demos like this, there would not have been extension today. If he were in charge, I'm sure there'd be way more fucking people still staying there right now. Because since by and large the politicians were in charge, it was a very faulty movement where you can argue the questionability of the commitment when the majority of the people there are within that squad Democratic Party network. They wouldn't have been on board for the fight that real journalists like Franco and Max Blumenthal, if they were the ones trying to lead this movement, you would have a different group of people there. Not only that, a different group of people making demands, and several more voices screaming those same statements that you saw those two guys making over the past few days. And this last part is definitely a strong false dichotomy, because even if there wasn't a single politician there for much of that time, I still think it was possible that Joe Biden could have ended up still extending that, even without this politician-led movement, which is just going to stop short of the real outcome that needs to take place. The fact he's hijacking Eviction demonstration to get views for his channel is disgusting. I'm on YouTube too. I would never do that shit. No. If you believe that these journalists who aren't there for genuine reasons to advance this situation in a genuine way, then you gotta get your head out of your fucking ass, because that's clearly where Andrew Lee stuck in the squad's ass, trying to play for this shit that isn't enough. And guess what? I'm online too. And when I do take the opportunities that I can provide on coverage, I'm doing it for awareness. And I do not care whether that leads to real growth. I just care about making sure that I get the awareness out there. Just like when I went out to the March for Medicare for All. Even though I didn't get the opportunity to ask questions, the important part was I was there to make sure to provide coverage and awareness to that event. And if these things were taking place at the state capitol in downtown Denver, I've been there providing the exact same type of coverage like Max Franc Analysis. And I probably would have found myself in similar type of arguments with people who think I would be too unreasonable trying to bring up dealing with people gatekeeping on when they bring up healthcare and all the money being used on war that should really be used to take care of people here. Bringing awareness to this shit is not disgusting. It's the bare minimum of what you should be doing if you have the opportunity to, as a content provider. Is it always going to be done in a joyless way? No, because I bet this guy would probably be doing it in a disingenuous way. And when I take my opportunities to some on the ground coverage, I will be true to myself when I do it. And I think I'm disgusting in the process. That doesn't matter. I'm doing when I take those opportunities, I'll be doing what I believe is right here. And someone challenging him, he wasn't hijacking shit. You're completely mischaracterizing what he said. Why aren't you, with a much bigger following on a broadcast show, redacted tonight asking these politicians why they waited over a month to act on evictions? That's the real question here. You're misinformed. They've been talking about this shit for months. I'm sorry you haven't been paying attention. A lot of politicians are to blame, but why focus on the very few who have been raising this? You're playing into Pelosi's hands. Get that filter check muting you. That's the worst part about once he took to Twitter after leaving the Capitol, he cannot handle people challenging him from his left. What he's doing after a statement, muting you, blocking you, that's not how you're going to be. That's not going to be a good look for you when you decide to block off any of your left criticism. I can tell you why the situation at this point. They waited too late to start their They played the naive. They did the typical naive progressive fashion of trying to follow the proper back channels and play the inside game. That's why this got to the situation where it is now. And this type of cover isn't a good look, because what they really should have done, hell, even if they did it last fucking Monday, start the camp out then. They use that bully pulpit card, because if you play the inside game, following the proper back channels, they're going to be made to look like and weak. That's why they can't play the game. And you trying to defend them by doing this is not the gotcha that you think it is. And you was. The point of being there was to not purify the squad for every bad thing they've done. It was to get the moratorium extended. People are still out there till it reaches 100% of renters. What the fuck are you doing? Who cares if I was there or not? A lot of people who still won't be able to pay their bills weren't there either. So I think there were pretty fair questions to ask. The dude only started talking about voting records when he started pressing, hardly purifying. And all this further feeds the annoying gatekeeping arguments that these squad defenders have been breaking out all weekend with, and it's been pushed from the top down. And assume that people who aren't there can't actually add to the situation at hand. What type of bullshit is that? There are plenty of influential people who could have shined light on this issue and not be there and push this eviction situation crisis in the right direction. But when you play the "you weren't there" card, all you're doing is trying to ensure that it's harder for real fucking progress to happen here. So, once initial tensions calmed down, this guy ended up getting into another one of those forced to vote arguments. And I gotta give credit to this woman right here for taking him to task on many of those anti-forced to vote arguments. So I wanted to make sure that she got some shine there for doing that. This woman, in a way that she presented it that didn't make you seem like a overly online Kias, even when people like us try to take that argument to real life. It doesn't always. It can be tough to get see the merits of it, especially when you can't bring it to enough of a real life aspects. But if there's a common theme between these white people who come out against force of vote. It's just boils down to a lot of fear-pilled based reasoning for why it shouldn't be done. Like the fact that, oh, you have to concern troll about some disingenuous support over it. Then the next fear pill is negative media attention, when we know that negativity is likely to happen either way, unless these progressive politicians on the inside actually use their opportunities on mainstream media to counter those narratives. And then the beginning argument that they commonly like to get hung up on is the fact that it won't pass, because we know that it won't pass the first time. It's about creating an extra energy to this movement, and when it comes down to it, we should be forcing the vote relentlessly, regardless of how often it fails. Thank you for the follow, Paul Pablo. Yes, as I was saying, we should be forcing the vote relentlessly. If there's a principle that Republicans have, is they do not have this fear-mongered principle when it comes to trying to push their own agenda. And too often progressives have fallen hook, line, and sinker into the same trap of stopping their fight early and quitting a couple rounds earlier than they should. That's not what we should be rationalizing at all. And it doesn't matter how much we fail, it should always be about a constant fight. So that's why we need to be forcing the vote relentlessly, and if we had people really fighting for us inside, that's what really should happen. And I think this woman really presented that well. I'm not going to play it right now. I just wanted to quickly summarize the point she was making and how these mainly white anti-force the vote people are just eating fear pills. And the way it relates to this eviction moratorium is they're kicking harm down the road. If you think that there's a perfect, convenient time to vote when you have some made-up number of the supposed majority for co-sponsors, guess what? That harm will still exist whether you have the high number of co-sponsors being the main excuse for not forcing the vote, in addition to the fact that even if people voted disingenuously, we can still primary them if they're on every other issue, because even if you're for Medicare for all and you fucking suck on every other issue, that does not make you evade a challenge from their left. So we gotta debunk this fear-pilled bullshit arguments that constantly come from the fake-ass white savior anti-force the vote people. And this fucking bicycle Karen could not handle. You could see the anger in his eyes, and he did not want to be there for any of it. This woman, Colin Radix Carter, who was to his right, was also challenging his anti-force the vote argument. Wanted to make sure to give this woman some credit for making a very appealing argument here.